it was a lot more practical. So let's see what Tosfos says. Tosfos learns that Kadoli Maya Lakbulape, Loigashin the Kadoli Maya Lakbulape, Alhachigors. Chazinu Shmuel saw the Maya, to water the Kadola Vachiri. It was wavy and it was dirty. Amar Shmuel said, Gava Rabakasi, there's a great person coming. The Chosh B'me'eh, and he has severe stomach issues. How did he know that? Not because he figured it out because he saw a moifus happening. Rather, Pir Shama Shmuel. Shmuel heard he was sitting by the river. What was he doing by the river? He was probably going to the mikveh. He heard in the mikveh that the Sha'adam Gadol Hayabab Sfina, that there's a very chushaviyid, Haskihet Vekimtant, like the famous story with Tsar Nikolai in the mikveh. Adam knows the mice with Tsar Nikolai in the mikveh. Someone once told Tsar Nikolai, you spend millions and millions of dollars on your intelligence budget. I have a simple way where you could save a lot of money. You wouldn't have to spend so much money. You wouldn't need a CIA. You wouldn't need a department of DNI, a department of national intelligence. All you need to do is you go to the mikveh, to do a zach badid in a mikveh. Over there you'll find out what happened, what's going to happen, what could happen, what didn't happen. Everything you'll find out over there. And then you don't need to spend all your money. It costs you $5 to get into the mikveh, and that's it. You get all the intelligence in the world and a free towel and soap. So Nikolai goes to the mikveh. He wants to try it out. He sits down by the mikveh. He takes the hose for alle Yidden. He leans over and says, "Ni Yankel was titzich." So Yankel goes, "You didn't hear? Tsar Nikolai came down to the mikveh." So Shmuel is sitting there, and he heard a shmiyah that's a kipped al elechiyid v'meitishul. The Yada Shmuel, and Shmuel saw that the river was stormy up, and because of that, it was dirty water because the sand was stirred up in the water, and he realized that what is he going to drink? What are they going to drink on that ship? What's their drinking water going to be? It's going to be this cloudy water. The Yoda Shmuel, she used to be in the Nor, Shmuel was an expert doctor, so he knew that water would give him diarrhea. Since Shmuel was a doctor and he understood refuah, he told Karna, Zil Toyle Kani, which is the next sentence that we're about to learn in the Gemara, go smell his jug, meaning Karna was in the wine business and he was able to smell, he was able to sniff out if this wine was good. So sniffing out was a metaphor used to describe tapping on something and seeing who this person is. So Shmuel told Karna, I want you to go sniff up this God and Gadol. I want to know who this guy is and if he's really such a Talmid Chacham like people say he is. Pirish Tira Emu Chacham B'roi L'chamdoi, and if he is, then I'll give him free medical advice. Avienu Levesi ve'eseloi refuah, and I'll help heal him, and I'll heal him from his stomach ailments. V'chabdenu lefi ma'sharoi will be mechaber properly. So Tosfos learns there was no mofsim over here. Shmuel chapped right away that whoever's going to be traveling on this river is going to get sick. So I want to see if he's taka choshev yid, I'm going to heal him. I'll take him to my house and make him feel better. Rashi learns there was a moifus over here. There was a moifus done to protect someone who had diarrhea, and because of that, Shmuel wanted to find out who this person is to help him. So he told him, Zil toy. Shmuel told Karna, Zil toy lekal Karna, go sniff up his wine, tap him out, see where the yid is. Also, Ashkechel Rav, who was this Erlich Yid that we were talking about? As a matter of fact, he was Rav himself. So he wanted to see what Rav knows, so he decided to ask Rav the following questions to see who Rav was. Omele asked him, Minayin she'ein koisvin tefillin. How do you know that you're not allowed to write tefillin, ella al gabe or behemoth tohira, only on the skin of a behemoth tohira? So Rav answered him, and we learned that the Torah has to be able to be in your mouth. You have to produce the Torah on something that would be mutter to be eaten by you. So that's how you know you need to have an or of a behemoth Torah. How do you know by the dam nida? The marish damim are all red tinges. How do you know those are the marish of dam that are tomels nida? Shenemar vayiru moyav mineged es hamayim. Let's see Rashi. Let's see the pasuk inside. We have the benefit of having the pasuk here. Eshuma v'avoker v'Hashem ezorcha al hamayim vayiru moyav mineged es hamayim adumim b'kadam. They saw that the water was red like blood. So you see from the pasuk that blood is red. How do you know that when you do the bris, you do it in the place where we do it, and you don't do it anywhere else on the roof? Nemer kad or lasai. It says ubiyom hashmini yimel besar lasai, or it says va'oral zocher shelo yimel besar lasai, and then it says nemer lahalon or lasai va'lartem or lasai is period. Lagabi or laperis mal lahalon dovish oisapri, just like by Arlas Pri, it's something that reproduces. Afkan Davar Pri, so too the Arla that we're talking about by a human is the area of the body that makes pairs. In fact, the Gemara, Ema Libai, maybe the place to do the bris in his heart. And it doesn't mean we're going to soon see whether or not the kosher animal also has to be shechted, or even if the kosher animal is not shechted, you can also use it. In fact, we're going to see that even in a vela, as long as it's a kosher species, it does not have to be shechted as long as it's a kosher species. And the Gemara is going to get to that shortly. So Zok the Gemara, Avkan Davar Sheshapri, maybe the heart. And about it doesn't mean you should kill somebody and take his heart out. It means you should do an incision somewhere near the heart. Because it says also Lashon Orla, it says Maltem is Orlas Levavchem, or Ema Oznaim, maybe his ear. Tichsev hine Orla Ozna. So Gemara, dan Arlasai Tama me Arlasai Tama. We want to use the full word Arlasai, and we want to only compare it to a place where it uses the full word Arlasai, and that's only by Peiros, by Arlas Pri, and therefore we learn Davar Shaisha Pri. Ve'ein dan Arlasai Tama me Arlas She'ein Tama, from not a complete word of Arlasai. Omerlei, Maishimcha, Rav sees someone's peppering with questions to probe him, to see who he is. So he asked this person peppering him with questions like he's getting for Herod. He asked, what's your name? So Karna said, my name is Karna. Omerlei, Rav felt that Karna was not being respectful, because it's not respectful to check out a God of the Torah to see if he's worthy. That's not a respectful thing. And therefore, Rav cursed him and said, Yehi the typically Karna ve'ene, a horn should grow out of your eyes. And he cursed him because that was not Bakavadi. Now the Chassam Sofer brings down something quite interesting, which I don't understand, but I'm going to quote it anyway. And he says that why Bedavke did Karna probe Rav about these three things, because a Talmud Chacham has to be a mumcha in three things. He has to be a mumcha in Hilchas Ksiva, like writing Sefer Torah. He has to be a mumcha in Hilchas Shchita, and he has to be a mumcha in Hilchas Mila. So Ksiva is why he asked him why you cannot write tefillin only on the Or Behema Torah. Mila, he asked him, because that's one of the things. In Shchita, which has to do with dam, so that's why he asked, why is dam red? Which is a little bit shverlich, because really that was more negeya to damida. I know Moshe Feinstein used to always say, there were a lot of rabbanim in the 50s and 60s that they weren't such Talmidei Chachamim. But any time one of their congregants would ask them a shayla, all they did is they asked the shayla to Reb Moshe Feinstein, and then they paskined. So Reb Moshe used to say, to be a Rav now in America, you need three things. You need my phone number, you need to know Hilchas Ksiva Sefer Torah, and you need to know Hilchas Shabbos. Why? Because if you're middle of Kriyas Torah and they find a mistake in the Torah, you can't run and call me. Everyone's going to see. So that you have to know. And on Shabbos, you can't call me, because even if you do, I'm not going to answer the phone. So therefore, you have to know Hilchas Shabbos and Hilchas Ksiva Sefer Torah. Everything else, you can call me for. I just realized that I forgot to turn on the recording, but I see Akiva turned on the recording. But we didn't announce the sponsors.
No problem. We'll do it at the end. It's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry that I forgot. I got so excited that Pichas Yosef was back that I forgot everything else. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Avkad Dom Shechapri. We did already. So what happened was Karna was cursed by Rav because he felt it wasn't B'derech covered. But at the end of the day, Rav did pass the test. So Eile Shmuel Abeise, since Rav passed the test, Shmuel did invite Rav to his house to give him a refuah. But not all medicines are good. Sometimes you need a spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. And what did Shmuel offer up as a refuah for Rav's diarrhea? This is what he did. He tortured him. He gave Rav to eat bread, barley bread. And Rashi says barley bread is a laxative. So it made him give him even more of an issue where he had to run. Vikasa the harsana, and he gave him this fish, some type of fish in flour, which also creates the need to want to run. The ashke shiur, and then he gave him beer, which also is mishalshal. I don't know if anybody ever had to get a colonoscopy. Anyone over 50 did. So there's a special nuclear fluid that they make you drink the day before that guarantees a guf noki. So that's what Shmuel was trying to serve up to Rav. And then, to make matters worse, and Shmuel made sure that Rav would not have access to a bathroom. So imagine what poor Rav had to go through. His stomach wanted to explode, yet he didn't have access to a bathroom. Why would Shmuel do such a sadistic thing? Because he knew for the refuah, he had to clean out, he had to do a complete purging and cleansing of Rav's body to make him healthy again. Rashi says, he's going to have nuclear explosions going on inside his system, and he would be completely purged. In the meantime, Rav didn't know what was going on. Rav was in bad shape.
This must be the source of all the machlokes of Rav and Shmuel.
So Rav was so upset with Shmuel, he thought this was some type of mean prank, and it says, Layit Rav. Rav cursed Shmuel. When he said, Mandim Itzara, and the person who caused me so much pain, he shouldn't have children. And Shmuel never had children. Even though the Kalala was al atnai, but Kilas Chacham, Afil al atnai, is Mekoyim. And even though Shmuel had good intentions, nevertheless, if Rav cursed him, he suffered terribly for it. Now the shaila is,
Yossi, the article says that he cursed him that he shouldn't have sons.
Or should have
He said Shmuel did have
daughters. He had.
Yeah.
Okay. So the interesting thing here is that if there was no bathroom, not only couldn't he use it for sitting, he couldn't use it for standing either. He had no bathroom at all. So the question is, if you hold it in, the halach is you're over bal tashaksu. How could Shmuel have caused Rav to be over bal tashaksu? And he brings a raya from here. The shiur mitzyonim b'halacha brings a raya from here that holding in for the purposes of refuah is not usher at all, because
maybe you don't need a bathroom for number one.
I'm sure Rav wouldn't have just done it public.
You need bushes.
I hear.
Okay.
The other interesting thing is, now Reb Yisrael just mentioned that it's only sons that they didn't have and not daughters. Because the elephant spoke out from somebody that when you hold in number one, it also causes you not to be able to have children. But that would impact, and that's why Rav cursed Shmuel that he shouldn't have children, because you caused me that maybe I wouldn't be able to have children because you made me hold it in. But according to the explanation that Reb Yisrael quoted from the R scroll, that it was only sons that he didn't have. then this shot wouldn't work out. So I guess there's different ways to learn the Gemara.
No, the pshat could work out. Maybe he didn't curse Shmuel because he already had daughters.
Shmuel already had daughters, or Rav already had daughters?
No, he cursed Shmuel that he shouldn't have children. So you said that.
And Shmuel had already had daughters, you mean?
Right, he already had.
Notice the wording isn't that he shouldn't have children, that his children shouldn't survive. So having before wouldn't really help.
Oh, okay.
So it's a good source. Okay, Zok the Gemara, Kitanoi, it's a machlokes tanoi. Minayin lamila sheba'osim makom. How do you know that the bris occurs in that place? Zok the Gemara, nemer kan or losai, the nemer lahal or losai. Mal lahalon dover sha'oisa pri, avkan dover sha'oisa pri, the Reb Yosys. Nos nomer any sarach. I don't need that limud. Hareyu oimer v'oral zachar asher lo yimayl b'sar losai. What do you mean v'oral zachar? Obviously, makom shenikir bein zachar till nakos. Where is the bris done? It's done in a place where it would be apparent what the gender is. It's very funny that the Gemara says this. The Gemara could have said makom zachar. Oral zachar is makom zachar. It says makom shenikir bein zacharus l'nakfus. I wonder if that means to promote what the Muslims do. FGM. But that's not what it means. You know what FGM means, Chansi? Female genital mutilation. That's what the Shagun do. Zok the Gemara, Tanraban, Koisvin Tfilin. So someone asked this earlier, if you have to shech the animal, if the cloth has to be.
Sorry, Yossi, the difference is at the time they're born or even as adults? Because, in other words, you're saying makom shenikar is at the time they're born. I could see that there's a difference. Otherwise, it's very difficult to discern between a baby girl and a baby boy. But when you're older, there's a lot more differences. One might have a chasima zakon. Right.
But there's still only one bona fide way of being 100% sure, especially nowadays.
Not these days, though.
Right. Well, it depends how far they went, pre-op or post-op. Okay. You could write tefillin. You write tefillin only on the or of a behema that's tar. Akiva, did you see what somebody just wrote on the chat? Koishin tefillin al gabi or behema tar. On the or of a behema tar, val gabi or chaya tar. Val gabi or nevelos a trefus shalahet. So even though it's a nevel trefus, you wouldn't be able to eat it. Nevertheless, as long as it's from a min kosher, you're allowed to use it for klav. Now, each individual parsha, before it's placed into the tefillin, it's tied up in the hair. They use hair from that animal. And it's also tied with the gid, with sinews of the kosher animal. The halacha l'Moshe Messinai, and it's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai shatfilin nechracha is besayron, that you tie up each individual parsha with the hair of the animal, and it first begidon, and you tie the parshas together with gid. Aval ein kosh, when you're not allowed to write tefillin, loy al gabe or behemoth tmeya, not on the hide of a behemoth tmeya, loy al gabe or chayet tmeya. Veitzor chloimar al gabe or nevela utrefa shalom. Surely the nevelas and trefas of a behemoth tmeya would not be able to be used. Einich b'sayon, the einit first begin. Zu she'ela shol by tisu echad es Rabbi Yeshua. This is one Hagirsi. This is one of the shilas that Rabbi Tusi asked Rabbi Yeshua Hagirsi. The question was as follows: Minayin she'ein kosin tefillin al or behemoth tmeya dichsev l'man tiyeh teres Hashem b'ficha midavar muter b'ficha, like we said earlier. El Meyata the Rabbi Tusi asked, If it has to be mutter leficha, so that even if it's from a min kosher, if it was an avelu and treifa, you also shouldn't be able to use that cloth for a tefillin. Amarlei, so Reb Yosys told him, Em sholach mashal, Lama Davidim. Let me explain to you the difference. L'shnei b'nei adam shenischayvu hariga l'malchus. Two people were condemned to death by the malchus. Echad hargei melech, one person the king himself killed. The echad hargei is pakliter, and the other one was killed by the executioner. Ezemen meshubach, who would you say would be more honorable? Havaimer zesh hargei melech, the person who's killed by the king himself is obviously someone who's more respectable. So too, an avelu treifa of a behemoth kshera, an avelu treifa means Rebbeinu killed it. It died of natural causes. So therefore, if it died of natural causes, it's still better than a treifa behemoth and God. So Gemara, if it's so meshubach, when the melech kills something versus the executioner, why aren't we allowed to eat kosher animals that died natural death? Amrlei, so Yeshua told the Baitusi, Hatoyer Amr Lashoichlu Kol Nevela. The Torah explicitly forbids it. Ba'at Amr Yoichlu. So the Baitusi was impressed. He said, Amr Kalos, not bad. That's a good call. I'm impressed. Touch the Shinyapis. Tosfos doesn't like my pshat. Because Tosfos says, Eza Mechem Choshev Osher Hagimelech. In Tomer, Teinech Meisumei Aleim. I understand an Avela that died of natural causes. But the churais v'akurais, animals that were murdered, that were killed, just not through a kosher shchita, ma'ikalamemer, those klafin you're also allowed to use for tefillin, yet those you wouldn't be able to argue for harga melech, there a person killed it. The Shloimers of Tosfos, kibin de mesu, sorry, since if it dies of natural causes, that skin can be used for tefillin, imkain, that just proves that doesn't mean that you actually have to have a heter to eat this particular hide. That just shows us that reveals to us that when we have the limit of it doesn't mean that you literally have to be able to eat it. It just means that it has to come from a species of animal that you're normally allowed to eat. Zok Tahil Gemara. Ein oisin hilmi b'Shabbos. Hilmi is a very strong brine. You're not allowed to make brine. And the reason why you wouldn't be able to make it, there's different reasons why not. Rashi will tell us in a minute, and we're going to learn the Rashi inside as to why brine would be usher to be made. Aval oisa hu esmei hamelach, you are allowed to make salt water. B'toivel behen pitoy, and you're allowed to dip your bread into salt water. And you could put the salt into a tafshel to treat it. Reb Yosy, I don't understand. What's the difference if you put a lot of salt into it to make it into brine, or a little bit less salt to it until it's salt water? Why should there be a difference? Now let's see Rashi, where Rashi gives us a little bit of an understanding as to what the problem here is. Is suggesting if putting a lot of salt into the brine is usher to do, even making salt water with not too much salt should also be a problem. And and if it's mutter, if you don't use too much salt, af elu mutar. The Gemara mefarish to l'chumer am Reb Yosy to chulon le'isser. Reb Yosy is trying to suggest not that everything should be mutter no matter how much salt you put in it. Rather, since you could put in a lot of salt and make it into brine, therefore, even if you make salt water with a small quantity of salt, it should also be usher. What's the malacha? They used brine in the process of processing hides. So by making brine, it's the first step in ibud oiris. It's misakin the food. There are those who learn that it's actually in the category of bishul. Why you're not allowed to make salt water?
Yes.
Yes.
How come on Pesach, when it comes out on Shabbos, you have to make it before the thing. If so much you can make it, am I missing something?
Because we probably are machmer like Reb Yosy, who doesn't allow you to make salt water at all.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So he has so how would you be able to make salt water? That's only if you reduce the potency of the salt. How do you reduce the potency of the salt? It's nice and shemen lechatchila l'seichamayim. Oil has a koyach to weaken the strength of the salt. So if you mix the oil either into the water before you mix the water into the salt, or you put oil into the salt first, then it would be allowed. And that's why if you want to salt a salad, you should make sure to put on the dressing first that has oil in it, because then you'd be allowed to salt it. Once you oil something, there's no problem of salting. There's actually a machlokes achronim as to when you're allowed to salt. And we're going to soon see you're allowed to salt right before the Suda, a little bit at a time. The question is, how much are you allowed to prepare? Are you only allowed to prepare for the immediate Suda, which some achronim learn, or are you even allowed to produce enough salt water for the whole Shabbos? Mike Omar, although Rashi already spilled the beans, the Gemara wants to know, was Reb Yosy trying to say that regardless, salt water should be mutter to make, or regardless, salt water should be us to make? You're not allowed to make, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Rashi says my karma is different. My karma is my hilmi umay mei melech. What is hilmi and what's mei melech? So the Gemara tells us, Shmuel tells us, you're not allowed to put a lot of salt. You're allowed to put in a little bit of salt in your salt water. Reb Yosy. Reb Yosy said, Reb Yosy said, V'alayhu hilmi bein mutar and bein muat. The Gemara wants to know Reb Yosy la'eser lahatir. Was Reb Yosy trying to make a point that everything should be usher to make any type of salt water, or is he trying to be matir, to say any type of salt water you would be allowed to make? Amar Yehуда lahatir. Reb Yosy's intention was to be matir. How do I know? It doesn't say Reb Yosy asers. Amalei Rabba hamidikatani seifa the eluhein meimelach hamutarin. At the end of the Mishnah, it says these are where it's mutter. Michlal Reb Yosy lesser. That would indicate that Reb Yosy was coming to aser. Elo amarabba lesser. In fact, that's what Reb Yosy's intention is, to aser any type of salt water. Lesser. Another brayso that also shows that Reb Yosy was being machmir. If you were soaking some type of yerek that you were soaking, you were pickling. If you were pickling something, they used to pickle things in broken shards. If you're pickling something, you're not allowed to make salt to pickle things on Shabbos. But you are allowed to make a small amount to use. You can dip your bread into it, and you're allowed to put it into the tafshil. Reb Yosy, and this is the brayso explaining Reb Yosy. People are going to say that malacha meruba asura, malacha metas muteris. Are we going to start saying that you're allowed to do a little bit of a malacha, not a lot? It's either al asur or al muter. And Reb Yosy says beferish here ela elu ve'elu asur nein. So you see clearly that Reb Yosy was coming to be machmir. Ve'elu ein melach hamutarin. If you know shemen the melach or shemen the mayim, because oil reduces the strength of the salt. You're not allowed to first mix salt water and then pour oil into it. That would not be allowed. You have to either mix the oil into the water first or the oil into the salt first. Izin Tzenoin ve'esriksim. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda bar Chaviva. Einosh memelach asin. You're not allowed to make strong meimelach. My meimelach asin. What is strong meimelach? Rabbi Reb Yosef bar Abba Dormi Tavayu kol shavetza sofa behed. If it's such a thick salt water, we know that you float in salt water like yamar melach. So if an egg will float in it, that means that it's too much salt. The chama, how much is that? Rabbi, tretil some milcha, vitil some maya. If it's 2/3 salt and 1/3 water, That you're not allowed to do. Am I making a mistake? Don't all eggs float? Eggs always float, don't they? No, eggs do sink. When you put eggs in the pot, they sink, right? I don't cook for myself, so I don't know. So eggs sink, but if there's a lot of salt in the water, then the eggs will float. They'll also cook faster because if salt water has a higher boiling point, so it ends up that the eggs in it cook faster. Why would you use such heavy salt water for? 2/3 salt. That's if you were making some type of fish dish. That you put a lot of salt into it. That would probably mean schmaltering. Tani Reb Yosys actually can't be schmaltering because oil weakens the salt. Tani Reb Yosys you're not allowed to salt radish or eggs on Shabbos. Radishes are usher because salt improves it. Because the salt doesn't have such an impact on the egg. I used to salt my radishes because I held it shouldn't be a problem on Shabbos because I thought that the salt ruins the radish because it takes away the sharpness. The geschmack of the radish is its sharpness. Salting it takes that away. So since it's being mavsted, I thought it would be much to do on Shabbos because Amina Afsuda come in the lay. The Amr Shmuel Pugla Churfi Mali because Shmuel said, what are the geschmack radishes? The sharp ones. But given the Shmana Laha. Once I heard the following: the Chiyasa Ulav Amr b'Marava Malchi Kishri in Marava even during the week to make the radishes geschmack. They would salt piles and piles of radishes. So clearly, the salt improves the radish. So because of that, I had to refrain from salting radishes on Shabbos. And therefore, milmlach loy milchana, I stopped salting radishes. But tavule vadam and tefilna, I still dipped in one bit at a time. Now, right over here, I have a little bit of a problem. I do have a little problem. Because if you look at Rashi, the R scroll points this out. When it says, en mochut steinu beya, how many aren't you allowed to? Gimel v'dal chatichas shachar. If there's 3 or 4 together, then you're not allowed to do it. Shamelech ma'abda, the melech works on them, v'nasan koshim v'avatik, and then improves them. That means if I had only 1 or 2, it would be allowed, because Rashi just says 3 and 4 is not allowed. But later on, Rashi says, mimlech l'mulchana shtayim yachad, even 2 I wouldn't do it. Mashma, that even 2 you're not allowed to. So the article points out, why would Rashi here change from 3 and 4 to 2? Tanya Yehуда b'chaviva, esrig, tznoinu beya. These 3 things: an esrig, a radish, and the egg. Il molekli plasana chatzoina, if they didn't have the outer shell. And by egg, Rashi says it doesn't mean the shell; it means the white part of the egg. It's using the word klipa because an esrig and a radish have a klipa. But a beya, we're just talking about the chelboin, which is the white part of the egg. If it wasn't for those parts, they would never ever get out of your stomach. You would be constipated forever. So it's those peels that somehow prevent constipation. No one ever drowned in Yam HaMelech. Again, we know because very salty water is very buoyant. Reb Yosys, hafucha Sodom v'hafucha mila. Sodom was turned over, and the words that Reb Dimi said regarding Sodom also is backwards. Doesn't make sense. You're saying Gaver Huda Leitova, a person never drowned in Yam HaMelech, as if to say that other things did sink. Kishur Tova. Are you saying that maybe logs or beams did sink? Of course not, because beams would never sink; they float. What Reb Dimi meant was a kal v'chomer. Lo mibayik shura, for sure wood. Wood always floats. Even a person who normally would sink in water, a person would not sink. Why is it important for me to know about whether or not you float or sink in Yam HaMelech? Rabban was walking behind Reb Yirmiyah at the shore of the Yam HaMelech. And he asked Reb Yirmiyah, and now we're getting into the concept of refuah b'Shabbos. And he wanted to know if I'm allowed to wash my face with this water because the salt water of Yam HaMelech was considered therapeutic for eyes. Let's see what Rashi says. Would it be also because of refuah? The gozer abominable chol refuahs b'Shabbos, any remedy on Shabbos the Rabbanan outlawed, because we were afraid that it would lead to someone grinding to prepare a medicine. What does salt water do? The Elam Rappa says so if you want to heal your eye, you use a saline solution, salt water. Omalei shaperdami. You're allowed to wash your eyes. Or you're allowed to wash your eyes. Why are you allowed to? Eyes refuah. So Rashi to love mucha milsul refuah. When you're washing your eyes with salt water, it's not obvious that you're doing it for refuah. Aval pichim rapin, even though they do have that therapeutic effect, nevertheless, shari, the time of the refuah, the asira, less alexera, shamisak some. It's only exera in the first place. The dom and the tchina shav melocha. So since it's only exera, and this is not 100% apparent that you're using it for refuah, it's not a problem. How about opening and closing your eyes? So there, you're showing that you're obviously trying to get it into your eyes. I didn't hear a direct psak on this specific shaila. If you're allowed to wash your eyes with salt water and open and close them to get the water, because then it's more obvious that you're doing it for refuah. But I heard a similar psak that would help shed light on this shaila. Sometimes Reb Zeir would say the following halach in the name of Rav Masna. And sometimes he would say the name of Amar Ukva, but regardless, but regardless, it was said in the name of the father of Shmuel or the father of Levi. Amar he said as follows: Chad Amar, one of these two people, the father of Shmuel or the father of Levi, one of them said the following halacha: Yain b'soicha ayin aser, putting wine directly into your eye, and I guess in those days they thought that was good for your eyes. It would be aser. Al kav ayin, but you're allowed to put it on top of your eye. Mutter, that would be mutter. That's what one of the avua said, and the other avua said, right tofel. If you have nuclear saliva is someone who hasn't brushed his teeth in a long time. He wakes up first thing in the morning, and before he uses his Listerine, he takes that nuclear grade saliva, which also had healing properties. Afilu al gava ayin osir, even on top of your eyes osir, because nobody in their right mind would ever use such a nuclear product on their eyes unless it was for refuah. So it's much more obvious that it's for refuah. Shirachi speaks out, what was the kiyotze by Shemati? We're looking for an answer about if you're allowed to wash your eyes with water from Yam HaMelech. So Rashi, the heicha the mucha milsa the refuah of it, if it's obvious from what you're doing that you're doing it for refuah, aser. And maybe it's a miftach nami, if you want to open your eyes and close your eyes while you're washing your eyes with salt water from Yam HaMelech, mucha milsa. That's mucha milsa. So those are the Rabdimi. The Omar like Tava Gavar b'Yom D'Sedoim. So still, what the Gemara was probing, what chiddush did we learn from the fact that Rabdimi said that no one ever drowned in Yam HaMelech? Nafkala mina ha. Even the Milchi Tuva Masu, since Yam HaMelech is very salty because people can float in it, therefore it's at the level of medicine almost. And therefore you wouldn't be allowed to wash your eyes with water from Yam HaMelech and open and close your eyes. That was the proof that we brought. So we have two halachas. One was yain b'soicha ayin, and one was reg tafel b'soicha ayin. We know one of them was said by Agudah Shmuel, and one of them was said by Agudah Levi. But who said what? So Dr. Martin, Stein da Agudah Shmuel who the Omer yain b'soicha ayin aser al gava ayin mutter. I'm going to bring a raya that this halacha was said by Shmuel's father. The Omer Shmuel, since Shmuel said shayra adam pita b'yayin, a person may dip bread into wine, then put that bread that's soaked with wine on his eye, Shabbos and Shabbos. Well, where did Shmuel get this halacha from? The Shmi Alei Miman. Who did he hear this from? Lav the Shmi Alei Miavua. He probably heard it from his father. So therefore, we'll say that the wine halacha was what said in the name of Shmuel's father. Ultimately, Shmuel said a different halacha about Roy Tofel. And he said that Roy Tofel afil agabe an aser. So are you going to say that also was from Shmuel's father? The Shammai man, who did he hear it from? If he heard that from his father, didn't we say that one of these two halachas was said in the name of Levi's father? Which one? It seems like you have svarish to say that both halachas were said in the name of Shmuel's father. Ella, what must have happened is one of these halachas that Shmuel said over, he heard from his father. And the other halacha Shmuel must have heard from Levi, and he said them both. We don't know which halacha Shmuel heard over from his father, and we don't know which halacha Shmuel heard from Levi. Omar Maruk Shmuel, Shayur Adam Kilurin Me'erev Shabbos. A person is allowed to soak kilurin. He has a fancy word for it, collyrium. It was some type of ointment that was good for the eyes. The arches of something of paste that was used for eyes. The notional gabe'enov b'Shabbos, you're allowed to put them on your eyes on Shabbos. Ve'ena choshesh, you don't have to be choshesh that there's going to be a problem. Bar liluy have a koi kamei de Bar Ukva. He was standing in front of Bar Ukva. Chazi saw that b'mai to Pasach, he was opening and closing his eyes when he was using this kilura stuff. Omer lei kula hai vaday lo shorim Mar Shmuel. For sure, Mar Shmuel would not have allowed that because that is for sure muchach milsa. That was for sure muchach milsa that he's doing it l'refuah. Shalach Reb Yanai Mar Ukva. Reb Yanai sent to Mar Ukva. Now Mar Ukva hung around with Shmuel. Rashi says over here that Mar Ukva have a shchiach kabe Mar Shmuel. Mar Ukva used to hang out in the vicinity of Shmuel. He was the Avbez in the days of Shmuel. Shmuel was the doctor. So sometimes people reached out to Mar Ukva to get remedies that he had available to him from Shmuel. So Shalach Le'Ren Mar Ukva lishtel nar mehanach kilurin. The Mar Shmuel. Send us some of this kilurin ointment that Mar Shmuel made. Shalach Le, Mar Ukva sent back to Reb Yanai, Shidur Mishadinoch. I'm going to send it to you, even though it doesn't work. But I'm going to send it to you. I don't want you, if I don't send it to you, you're not going to believe me when I say it's not effective. You're going to say I'm cheap. So to avoid that you should call me cheap, I'm going to send you exactly what you asked for. But I want you to know, the best thing for you is a little drop of cold water that you wash your eyes with in the morning, and washing your hands and feet with warm water in the evening. You don't need any special medicines. Just do this and you're fine. I'm going to send you the medicine anyway, but you should know, if you want to take care of yourself, use what you have readily available to you. Toiva tipa son in chakras, uchitus yadayim verglaim arvis, mikol kilurin shaboilam from any other remedy. Huayah used to also say, yad la'ayin tikotzitz. If you take your hand and you touch your eyes, brashes kodim shit el yoda, before you wash negelasser, such a hand should be cut off. Yad l'chodim, if you put your hand to your nose, again before you wash negelasser, tikotzitz should be cut off. Yad l'peh, if you put your hand in your mouth, tikotzitz. Yad l'oizin, if you put your finger in your ear, again tikotzitz. Yad l'chasuda, if you put your hand by the chasuda, which is rived the kustisa, which the article teaches as the wound from somebody who just had a kozastam, from someone who had bloodletting, tikotzitz. Yad l'ama, touching oisa mokim, the mokim abris, is tikotzitz. And Rashi on the Beis says one shot, it's before you wash negelasser because it causes problems. And Rashi on the Beis says another shot is you're never allowed to touch that area because it could lead to kishui and to itzar zera, and that's why it uses the word tikotzitz in this whole sugya, because really tikotzitz is referring to someone who touches his armor, that hand should be cut off because it's an avot, it's an avera. And Rashi, because of that, all these other things they use the word tikotzitz for as well. Yad lefit abbas, if someone touches where the sun don't shine, tikotzitz, it should be cut off. And that's not if you wash it before you nigel wasser. That's anytime during the day. Rashi says, if you touch your pita bas and then you touch any other part of it, like your eye, that's going to cause problems. You have to wash it. Yad legigis, if you touch a barrel of beer, Rashi says, tikotze should be cut off. I guess it ruins the beer. Yad misma, because the eye, if you touch your eye before the Netilas Yadayim, it's going to make you blind. Yad machreshes, if you touch your ear, it'll make you deaf. Yad mila pelipus, touching your nose or your mouth is going to cause you to have reach hachotim bapeh. It's going to cause you to have very bad breath. And on that note, we will stop. And I wish you a wonderful day. Now we have to talk about the sponsors of the day. We have a lot of sponsors today. I'll ask you if you'll help me. I know Shaya and Chuma Schachner is sponsoring today. Today is Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Shaya and Chuma Schachner is sponsoring. Liluy was his mother. And I believe Yossi and Mermelstein is sponsoring today. Liluy nishmas, I don't remember who it is. It's someone Baruch.
His father.
His father? Is it, do you have his name handy?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. You sent it to me.
Yeah, Ya'akov ben Avraham Yehuda.
Yours Erev Shabbos, and Malcolm Levine is sponsoring so that the chasne that's scheduled for Wednesday of Ruchama Simon should be V'itoi, Ubezmanoi, Ubim Koimoi. And I want to thank the people in the shiur who sponsored the broadcast in honor of my daughter's chasne. And I also want to thank the company called ID Tech, who's kind enough to give me the use of their boardroom and their internet services the entire time that I'm here, so that I can say shiur at this time in the morning without waking up my host in the house that we're staying so early. So thank you very much to the ID Tech Solutions family.
Yes.
Yes.
When you drive to the IDK, are the streets emptier than normal?
Let me turn off the recording before I comment. This is Lakewood.